This is Zing-It. We're going to talk about this amazing stuff. So Zing-It is a ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene line, commonly known as Spectra or Dyneema, that's made by Sampson. It's only 1/16 of an inch thick. That's less than 2 millimeters in diameter. The line was originally designed for arborists to use as a throw line to get larger lines over tree branches. Consequently, it really does a great job at hanging bear bags, but it's also really great for all sorts of other uses when you go backpacking. The line is enormously strong. The 1/16 inch line will support 500 pounds before it breaks. The working load is probably somewhere in the 20 to 25% of that range, but that's still more than 100 pounds that this line can lift very easily and safely. Zing-It can be purchased typically in 25-foot lengths or 180-foot mini spools. I've typically bought 25-foot lengths, but in retrospect, I wish I'd bought a mini spool. I use it so much. Depending on where you get it from, it comes in different colors. It includes yellow, blue, red, gray, and so Spectra line is abrasion resistant, UV resistant, and also is not affected by water, so it's great stuff. It is a little slippery, so when you tie knots, you have to put extra turns in it, or alternatively, you can splice Spectra. I have found it really easy to splice this stuff and typically splice loops in the end of the line to attach it to tarps or other objects that I use backpacking. So let's make an eye splice with our Zing-It. I've got some Zing-It and a hemostat and a yarn needle here. The first thing we're going to do is take the yarn needle and poke it through the Zing-It. You need to be far enough back to make a good sized loop. Even a few inches back here, I'm going to end up with a fairly small loop. Take your hemostat, push it through that hole you made with your yarn needle, and then grab the end of the Zing-It and pull it through to make your loop here. Now this loop's going to slide, so in order to keep it from moving, we're going to need to put another stitch, if you want to call it that, in it to lock it. This is called a Brummel lock. You're going to take the yarn needle and run it through your short end on the Zing-It to make another hole here. And then you're going to slide your hemostat through that hole and grab the long end of the Zing-It. And you're going to pull the long end of the Zing-It all the way through the short end to create your locked Brummel. So there is a way to do this if you don't have access to the long end. I won't do that right now, but that can be done. Once you pull all that through, I basically just open up the eye and dress and tighten everything down. And there's your locked Brummel right there. So the final part of this, and the part that gives your eye splice some strength, is to take that tail and bury it inside the rest of the Zing-It. For that I used the yarn needle and I insert it into the long part of the Zing-It right near where it comes out of the Brummel, and then kind of tunnel it down through the Zing-It. And you can kind of bunch it up on there so you get a fairly good distance that you're tunneled, even though the needle's not that long. And then once you get the needle tunneled, what you're going to do is flatten out the end of the Zing-It and put it in the eye of the yarn needle. And it'll just barely fit in here. You have to kind of really flatten it out. And you don't have to get it through completely, just a little bit to kind of get it in there. Because what you're going to do is poke the end of the yarn needle out of the Zing-It where it's tunneled through, grab your yarn needle with your hemostat and then work it through. It takes a little bit of effort. You got to twist and pull and spend a minute or two to get it through because it's a tight fit, but it'll go through. Just keep working at it. And here it made it almost all the way through, so I'm going to grab it again, choke up a little bit and pull it through, and there's your Zing-It through. And then dress it all down. And I ended up with a little bit more tail here than I needed sticking out. So what I'm going to do is kind of see where I want to cut it off and just take my scissors and cut the Zing-It a little bit shorter. And then when you redress it, the Zing-It will bury inside where it's tunneled. And then you have your finished eye splice right here. Typically, splices like this will retain about 80% strength on the line, and you can use the splice to attach to almost anything. So now I've got this piece of spare Zing-It with a splice in one end. What am I going to do with it? Actually, you know what? I can make a pack hanger. It's really easy. We're going to make this into a whoopie sling so you can adjust the length of it, and then we can use it to hang our pack. So here I've got my Zing-It with a splice in one end, and I've added a bead that I'll put inside this whoopie sling to keep it from going in itself. The first thing to do is to kind of lay out where you want to do your bury. I'm going to try to bury about 5 or 6 inches for the whoopie sling, fairly close to the eye splice. Go back about 3 or 4 inches, and then we're going to do our bury from about those 2 points. Start out with your yarn needle and insert it into your Zing-It and go ahead and start your bury. And once you get the needle in a good bit, you're going to flatten out your end of your Zing-It. Put your bead over it to put it on the loop, and then insert your Zing-It into your yarn needle. And once you get your Zing-It into the yarn needle, you're going to continue the bury and start to pull the Zing-It through the center of the bury. This is going to take a minute or two, and usually what I do is I kind of go about halfway and grab my yarn needle with my hemostat and start pulling the Zing-It through. And once you get it started, you're going to let go of the yarn needle and push it back in and run it down the center of your Zing-It a little bit more to the end of where you want to do your bury. And you grab your needle again and keep pulling through till you finish pulling the Zing-It through the bury. And it'll pop out here in just a second. There you go. And there's your finished bury that's probably about 5 inches or long or so. So there's your whoopie sling made. And now you've got this end here, and you want to clean that up. And the best way to do that is just to turn the needle around, run it back into the end of the Zing-It, and you're just going to bury it into itself. This will give you a nice clean end that's twice as thick as normal, and that'll keep the end from going back into the whoopie sling. So do it, pull it through, take your needle off, dress it up. I'm going to cut off the excess here a little bit with my scissors, and then dress the end till it's nice and clean. So here's your whoopie sling. It can get pretty tight. You know, here it's only about 1 foot long maybe, and then you can take the whoopie sling and open it up, slide that stuff right through itself there, and then you have a fairly long whoopie sling to go around a big tree or something like that. And there's the finished product. So I've got my pack hanger here. I've adjusted the length of the whoopie sling to the appropriate size for this tree. And all you simply do is run it around the tree, put it through yourself, and then you've got this little loop here where you made your eye splice to hook it to. I've got a little dog bone on my backpack. You could use
little carabiner if you want, and then I just put it around the dog bone, and then my pack is hanging. There you go. It's a nice, convenient height, stays off the ground.
So Zing-It's amazing stuff. It's lightweight, very, very strong, abrasion, water resistant, and it's good for so many uses. I've used it for ridge lines on tarps, tie out lines on tents and tarps. I use it on my pack, and as you see, I made a pack hanger out of it, and it's what I hang my pack with. So I hope you enjoyed all this talk about Zing-It and its multiple uses. I'll be out on the trail soon, and I hope to see you there.